The apartment overlooking Martyrs Square, August 10th, after breakfast. Jacques peered through the side window of the corner apartment. If he looked at an angle, he could see a large part of Martyrs Square. The apartment's location was perfect. It was on the third, top level of the building, and its location on the corner gave an excellent view of the surrounding neighborhood. "This looks good," Jacques commented as he tapped his knuckles on the plastic window panes. "And we know for sure that the big gathering is on the 14th. Dory had just gotten that from William a day earlier. "I bet they use that administration building to conduct their preparations for the rally." Jacques was thinking aloud as he surveyed the buildings. "They'll need power for their speakers and microphones, toilets and water, and a place for the party leadership to loiter before the actual speech." That one to the south is a Hezbollah party building," Dory agreed with Jacques' educated guess. "I bet they'll set up the speaker stand in front of that building. This window gives us a good angle. Even if they set up somewhere nearby, we have them covered. It'll be a 300-meter shot at least. Maybe 325. We'll check the map again to be sure." They had a good aerial map of the city, so estimating distance was no longer an art, but a matter of accurately measuring the distance with a ruler. "Yeah," Dory nodded in agreement as he looked out the window and guessed the distance on his own. "Let's get this room set up so we can do a test run when it gets darker." Jacques wanted to make sure all the components of the system were in working order, even though they had tested it all in J-Bale several times. "What do we need to do?" "We're going to move that wardrobe in front of the door so if someone looks in, they don't see our system. Also, we're going to attach the drapes on the window to the tip of the suppressor." "Why's that?" Dory wondered. "Well, we'll put a piece of wire around the suppressor and secure the drapes there. The drapes will conceal the system from anyone looking in from the window from the outside, like counter-sniper teams with binoculars. As we pan the system right or left, the drapes will move with the weapon, keeping it concealed. But if we pan the system more than a foot to the right or left, the drapes will pull free." "Why would we pan the system any more than that? We would be shooting the—" "You'll see. We're going to have a few surprises set up, like a counter-assault package and a counter-forensic package. That's why we brought the explosives. But we won't set up the packages until the night before in case they sweep the rooms before the rally. Tonight we'll make the stuff we need to conceal our packages." "Oh, that's why we brought the flag and the 5-gallon cooler." Dory was starting to put it all together. "Let's get to work." Martyrs Square, August 14th, 10:05 a.m. Jacques and Dory sat in the front of the Tough Book. Even though their hotel room was air-conditioned, both were sweating as they peered intently at the screen. They could clearly see the reticles of the scope and the front of the administration building. Outside their fifth-story hotel window, 600 meters away, they could just see the east end of the square and the crowds of people mobbing it. The apartment where their system was set up was hidden from their view. The square itself was packed with thousands of Hezbollah supporters dressed in black and bright green headbands. Hundreds of yellow Hezbollah flags hung down from the surrounding buildings. Scores of tents were in place, serving refreshments and protecting the crowd from the blistering sun. The air in the square was hot and stale. There was no wind blowing at all. The crowd had begun to gather hours earlier, even though the Secretary General of the party wasn't scheduled to speak until 10. Imad surveyed the sea of people. He called his lieutenants on his handheld Motorola radio, verifying that they were in position. All was clear. Imad called inside the administration building and signaled that it was okay for the Secretary General to come outside. Nasrallah walked through the front door in his flowing robes. As soon as the crowd saw him, they began a thunderous chant, "Hezbollah, Hezbollah, Hezbollah." The sound was absolutely deafening as 10,000 voices reverberated off the surrounding buildings. Hassan's burly, armored bodyguards leaned into the crowd, keeping them back from the Secretary General and the members of the Shura Council seated behind him on a modest wooden platform. Nasrallah still strode confidently to the podium and held both arms up in the air, silencing the crowd with a stern look. Nasrallah slowly looked around the square and then called out in a deep voice, "Allah Akbar." He dragged out the last part of Allah for dramatic effect. The crowd, hot, sweating, agitated, roared back as one, "Allah Akbar." Then they chanted with renewed vigor, "Hezbollah, Hezbollah, Hezbollah." The first 7.62mm fully jacketed armored piercing round entered Nasrallah's mouth and blew out the back of his head in a bright red spray that included tiny pieces of his skull and globs of gray brain matter. It was as if he had a watermelon sitting on his shoulders instead of a skull with muscles and sinew and hair. The Secretary General slumped to the pavement like a puppet with his strings cut. The next round struck one of Hassan's bodyguards directly in the chest, piercing his soft body armor, punching through his left lung. Blood oozed out of his chest and mouth. His eyes stared wide open, uncomprehending. The entire square broke into pandemonium. As if on command, the crowd instantly split into 100 separate mobs as they rushed the Imad, instinctively crouched below a barrier near the podium and called Ibrahim on the radio. "What do you have?" "Nothing, absolutely nothing. We're looking." Ibrahim listened to Imad in one ear as he listened to his other radio, which his sniper team leaders were calling. "What about the counter-sniper system?" "I'm checking it. Nothing." By now, Hassan's men were physically grabbing the members of the Shura Council and manhandling them into the cover of the administration building. Jacques and Dory watched the chaos through their webcam. The crowd looked like some giant organism trying to fight its way out of an enclosed space, looking for any opening it could find to squirt out of. "Goddamn internet lag, it's throwing my shots off." Jacques wasn't too upset, seeing how his first shot was dead on. "They're going in the building, through the door, right there!" Dory excitedly jabbed a finger at the screen. "I'm tracking." Jacques pushed the button and sent another bullet downrange, hitting a bodyguard in his lower spine just below his armor. Jacques was trying to get the council member before they could get inside, but the bodyguards were shielding them with their bodies. "I'm going to target the checkpoints and then the crowd." There were only 20 rounds in the magazine, so Jacques had to choose his targets carefully to inflict as much terror as possible with judicially selected targets. "We got something. The computer says the shooting is coming from one of those corner apartments on the right side, but I can't tell what floor." Ibrahim screamed in his walkie-talkie. He knew someone was using a suppressed rifle because he couldn't hear any gunshots even as the bodies were dropping. He was still in mental shock. He couldn't believe what he had seen before his eyes. The great leader's head had exploded right in front of Allah and everyone else. "I heard you. Have your sniper teams cover that part of the building. I'm sending the assault teams in. We'll search each floor until we get the right one." Imad would have his men in the building in a minute, maybe 2 at the most, depending on how hard it was to fight through the panic-stricken crowd. "We only have 1 round left." Jacques panned the gun away from the window, breaking free of the drapes and towards the doorway inside the room. "When we see the first guy come through the door, we'll start the sequence." Imad's assault team reached the bottom apartment in a frenzy. They kicked in the door, their AK-47s at the ready. An old lady stood across the room by the window, scared to death. The assault team swarmed through her 2-room apartment. "We got nothing on the first floor," Imad announced on the radio to anyone who was listening. 30 seconds later, they had torn the second apartment apart and were on to the 3rd floor. The first assault team member kicked the door in with his boot and eyed the room wildly, his assault rifle at the ready. 4 more gunmen poured in behind him, sweat pouring off their brows. All they saw was well-used furniture and a Hezbollah party flag hanging in the corner of the room. One man kicked in the door to the adjacent bedroom, but fell after running into a wardrobe positioned 2 feet from the door. The second man stepped over the first and rounded the corner. Just as he cleared the wardrobe, he took a bullet square in the chest, knocking him flat on his back. 2 other assaulters blindly fired their assault rifles on full auto, shredding the wardrobe and hammering the room with 7.62 bullets. Jacques and Dory only saw a blur as the first man came around the wardrobe. The assaulter had filled the entire webcam and scope because he was so close. "That's it. They found the gun." Here goes mine. Jacques pushed a button on the Toughbook. This sent a signal to the laptop in the apartment, completing a circuit. The circuit ran from the laptop through a wire that went under the rug, up along the wall, through a small hole drilled in the adjacent wall, and into a blasting cap secured firmly in a Soviet MON 100 anti-personnel mine. The MON 100 was hanging from a nail on the top left corner of the adjacent room. However, no one in the room could see it because of the Hezbollah flag hanging in front of it. The electric blasting cap detonated the mine's 4.5 pounds of explosives in a deafening explosion that hurled 400 pieces of shrapnel throughout the close confines of the living room, shredding 5 members of the Hezbollah assault team. Now, go for the counter-forensics charge. Jacques pressed another key on the Toughbook. A 5-pound charge of Semtex plastic explosives obliterated the Pantel unit, the other laptop, and blew the Galil and its aluminum frame mount to pieces. Simultaneously, a tandem charge ignited and blew a cheap plastic 10-gallon cooler filled with a mixture of high-octane gasoline and liquid soap, homemade napalm. The entire room burst into a ball of flame, burning alive 2 men from the assault team and charring to a blackened crisp the one who had been shot in the chest. Okay, we're done here. Sit tight for a couple of hours while we erase the hard drive on the laptop. Once we get back to the safe house, we'll remove the hard drive and destroy it. We might stay here for the night if the streets are still crazy. Yeah, we'll stay here until it clears up. Dory, too, didn't want to risk getting stopped and questioned by a Hezbollah patrol. They're going to find parts of the Galil, the Pantilt unit, and the computer, but there won't be much left. Any witnesses from the assault team who saw the complete system are dead. Depending on how long the apartment burns for, they probably won't figure out how the attack took place. Once they count all the bodies, they'll think the shooter got away. Jacques was sure there wouldn't be any incriminating evidence left behind. Hezbollah headquarters, August 14th, 5:30 p.m. Imad sat in the headquarters aid station holding his right arm that was bandaged and in a sling. He was in the hallway when the anti-personnel mine blew. The shrapnel from the blast had gone through the wall of the apartment and into the man standing in front of him. Only Allah had spared him from death. Even though he had a dozen pieces of shrapnel in his arm, he was alive. The door to the medical room swung open. Ibrahim walked in. "Are you okay?" Imad grunted. "We searched the apartment after the explosion but didn't find much. Part of the 3rd floor collapsed. It'll take a week to sift through the wreckage." Ibrahim looked at Imad's arm. Red stains of blood seeped through the stark white bandages. "Well, thanks to Allah, we went through with all of our security precautions," Imad croaked with some satisfaction. Ibrahim took this as a sarcastic rebuke of not just him, but of all the security sections. Ibrahim tried to understand what happened. "We couldn't see anything, Imad. Even when the shooting started, we didn't hear or see anything." "How is this possible?" "The acoustic system said it might have been that apartment, but it could have been from the other ones further down the same street. Now the General Secretary is dead and we helped cause it." "Not to worry, Ibrahim. Allah watches over Hezbollah and you and me. You did your job very well, and I am proud of you and our fallen comrades." "What are you talking about, Imad? Are you hallucinating from blood loss? The Secretary General is dead. 15 of our men have gone to paradise, and scores of our people are trampled to death in the streets. Are you mad?" Ibrahim couldn't believe what he was hearing. Imad looked up at Ibrahim. "Are you so sure a great leader is dead, old friend?" Khatib Party Offices, Beirut, Lebanon, August 15th, 10 a.m. Camille and William sat smugly at the small conference table in Camille's office, sipping hot, sweet tea as they watched the news by the Lebanese Broadcasting Corporation. Yesterday, they had seen live footage of the shooting of Hassan Nasrallah. This footage had been broadcast all over the world. It was on the internet and the major television stations. Over and over again, the world saw Nasrallah's head split open like an overripe melon. Several people had actually taken footage of different stages of the mayhem with their cell phone cameras and were posting them everywhere. Of course, the Khatib Party was one of the first to denounce the assassination as a despicable act of murder that had a destabilizing effect on Lebanon and the region. Hezbollah remained strangely silent since the attack. As Camille and William watched the television, a breaking story flashed. What could be more breaking than the death of Nasrallah? Camille wondered aloud. Hassan Nasrallah appeared on the screen, surrounded by a ring of reporters and armed guard. Camille and William's jaws dropped. Yesterday, unknown killers tried to assassinate me and silence the party of God. As you can see, they did not succeed, and the representative of Allah is still here. Hezbollah will find the jackals who murdered scores of our people, and we will not rest until justice is served. This I can promise you. This is a perfect example of how the current government in Lebanon is incapable of protecting its people, incapable of providing law and order, and incapable of governing this country. Nasrallah stared icily into the camera until the image was cut and the LBC newsman returned. Camille and William stared at each other in disbelief. Are you kidding me? William managed to get out first. Didn't we get him? Camille exclaimed. I saw his fat head explode on the TV screen myself. I don't know. Maybe the person we just saw wasn't Nasrallah. Maybe someone who looked like him. William's mind wandered in overdrive as he analyzed the possibilities. Or maybe that wasn't Nasrallah yesterday, only someone who looked like him. Camille didn't know what to believe. You mean a body double, a goddamn look-alike? William was incredulous. Why not? That bastard Saddam used a double all the time, and I know Khomeini did too. They duped us. Camille was incredulous. They had executed a flawless, forensically secure assassination of the wrong person. Hezbollah's counter-sniper measures had brought their security general a new lease on life.